Hey guys, welcome to Get Busy Watching. I'm your host, Honest Dan. Let's talk movies. You guessed it, it's a rapid fire, so let's get started.
Is that you two?
We've done it all.
So why'd you give it up?
He's just gone from job to job.
I'd rather work on my own now and be my own boss.
Wake up. Dad will go mental if you miss school again.
Keep this happy.
Get it.
Yes.
They track every parcel, don't they? To the front door and the back door. Even if you put one in the garden shed, they know where it lands.
This is 2 days in a row.
Just knuckle down.
This is another £100 fine and a sanction.
Otherwise, you're just going to end up like... Well, I don't know.
I just want things to go back to normal.
I love it, and I kinda hate it. Here's what I love. The story feels more like an allegory for lower class working conditions. That it's a common thing to see families like the Turners who are constantly struggling with making money, keeping up with payments, or, as it were, not keeping up with them, bouncing from job to job. The stress level of the film is extraordinarily visceral. And as someone who works in the guest service industry for a company that pretty much expects you to live and breathe it, lest you find yourself in the unemployment line, I understood all of Ricky's pain, from the emotional, mental, and to a lesser degree, the physical. Where I struggle with the story is the literal story that is guiding the metaphor. What I mean is this. Some of the characters are bland and even tiresome, specifically Sebastian. He's just a generic delinquent teen boy acting out and causing problems without ever giving the audience a reason to care about him. Yes, his parents work a lot and aren't always there for him, but Liza has a good head on her shoulders. My favorite character, by the way. But we don't get where he's coming from. What does "I just want things to go back to the way they were" mean? How were those better times? We don't get proper glimpses of that, and he just comes off as a whiny bitch. Maybe even he's supposed to be symbolic of something, but maybe this is something that only the Irish can relate to or the more cultured can understand, so I'm eager to be educated on what exactly this all might mean. But as I sit without that knowledge, it's kind of frustrating to see Seb on screen. But everything else about it was so powerful, and even scary to the point where it was almost a horror film. It may not be getting a perfect score from me, but seriously, if you see this playing at your local cinemas, which may be a long shot considering it's got a limited release, I'm still saying check it out. My honest rating for Sorry We Missed You, a strong 4 out of 5.
Hello, stranger. Hello, Mum.
Hello, stranger.
Hello, Mum.
I'm going to leave.
You can't just walk away after 29 years. You have to try.
Forgive me for needing you to be strong forever. Forgive me for fearing your unhappiness. Hold my hands and walk the old walk. One last time.
You know what? I like this. I really like this one. You can tell this was a passion project for the director, William Nicholson, who based this movie on his parents' divorce. How many liberties he took, I'm sure only he knows, but I feel like this is more true to reality than it isn't. I think it's important to note that Annette Bening is the primary focus of the story. I don't think it's necessary to say she's great, but she's great because if you've seen I, Tonya, she's basically Tanya's mom. She's super manipulative, guilt trips like a motherfucker, is obsessive, even a little creepy, but it's played up in such a way that I feel only Bening could make feel real and interesting. She absolutely steals the show. Everyone else is great in their own way too. I was worried Bill Nye was going to be boring with how dispassionate his line reads were, but that was actually his character and he makes it work surprisingly well. It won't go down in history as his best work, but it's not as bad as it initially makes itself out to be. Josh O'Connor is solid as Jamie, who is acting as the family messenger and constantly forced to take sides even though he doesn't want to. My only true complaint comes in the form of certain scenes in the end that were mishandled. What kind of son says, "If you commit suicide, let me know first"? Or Grace entering someone's house uninvited and no cops are called? It ain't perfect, it's got its flaws here and there, especially toward the end, but if you want to see Annette Bening give an amazing performance that would just be wasted on anyone else, then I highly recommend checking this out. My honest rating for Hope Gap, a 4 out of 5.
You're not really how I imagine an art critic would look.
Ever heard of Joseph Cassidy?
The art dealer?
Mm-hmm. Been invited to his estate.
You got rich friends.
No critic has spoken to this guy in over 50 years.
Jerome Debney.
It's an honor, Mr. Debney.
I'd value a Debney, James. And I'd like you to procure one for me.
Kind of underhanded, don't you think?
Holy shit. This is hilariously pretentious. I couldn't begin to tell you how strange this script is, but I'll start with how Elizabeth Debicki is written. I feel like every other line that she has is responding to every sentence with a question. Oh, that's not how a lady acts. Oh, and how does a lady act? Sentence about something about you. Oh, and what about me? So many of her lines are like that, and after a while I was fighting not to crack up. Even Donald Sutherland as Jerome Debney was kind of hamming it up with his weird southern accent. If anyone was worried that Mick Jagger might look out of place in this borderline heist movie, you'd be dead wrong. He fits like a glove. There's a backstory about Holocaust painters that somehow Jerome knew about. His latest masterpiece paintings are blank canvases and all entirely in his imagination. Then there's weird scenes about characters dying that may not have actually died, but would later for sure die. It's such a strange and slightly incoherent mess, topped with obvious symbolism that repeats itself many times, and you know exactly what it all means. It tries so hard to be deep and meaningful that I just can't find it in my heart to hate it. It is by no means a good movie, so if you had high hopes for it, scale those expectations back, because you're going to be laughing a lot more than being intrigued. It is silly, awkward, unintentional fun. My honest rating for The Burnt Orange Heresy, a 4 out of 5 for unintended entertainment.
You have a cow.
First cow in the territory.
This ain't a place for cows.
Good Lord, give me another.
Some people can't imagine being stolen from.
Let's hope he's one of those.
Went into this pretty blind, having only seen bits and pieces of the trailer here and there. Now that I have seen it, it's kind of boring, and yet oddly engaging. It's weird. I get what the story was going for. The spirit of being an entrepreneur, starting a new business set in the backdrop of a young America. It had all the right pieces to be at least passably compelling. And it is, but it sadly threw in too many obvious conflicts, takes too long to get to the meat of its own story, and it ends pretty much how you think it would end. We spend so much time establishing Cookie and King Lou, having learned very little about them in that first half hour outside of the obvious. They're good guys, they're seeking their fortune, standard. Then some rich important dudes bringing the only cow to the west and steal its milk to create treats for the locals. Honestly, this is where the movie shines. Its old world baking style really leapt out of the screen and made you want to try whatever it was the two men were making as much as the actual characters did. It's so brilliantly clever that I didn't care that much about plot. But then the super important guys show up, not knowing that their cow's milk is being exploited, and then the movie falls into predictability. I won't give anything away, but it just feels slow. When the movie is about baking, and these two men having bigger dreams to work toward, the film is honestly really compelling, heartfelt, and staggeringly relatable. But for my money's worth, it takes too long to get to those moments, and it goes in the direction that I feel is really lackluster. By no means bad, I just don't know how much I'd recommend it or who would be interested in seeing it. My dad might be interested. Parts of it, anyway. If you're a fan of baking and unconventional underdog stories, then I might recommend this. Just be ready for some boring elements that really sandwich those great parts. My honest rating for First Cow, a 3 out of 5.
Our basketball coach had a heart attack the other night. We need a new coach, Jack.
The last time they made the playoffs, back when you were playing.
Want to know why they're leaving you open? It's because they don't think you could hit the ocean from the beach.
Yo, he just spit facts at your ass, bruh.
I spent a lot of time hurting myself. I made a lot of bad decisions. I had a lot of regrets.
Keep pressing, trapping, taking charges. You guys earned this tonight.
Going from an unconventional underdog story to a very conventional underdog story. If you've seen something like Rudy, Mighty Ducks, or The Longest Yard, then you've seen this. Here's what it gets right. Ben Affleck does a great job playing this alcoholic man with a tragic past, complemented very well with Janina Gavankar. Seriously, this woman needs a starring role of her own. Doesn't count, no one cares. I will even admit that the younger actors do pretty well for what they're given. Sure, the characterizations aren't anything deep or original, but there is an endearing element to them, especially in Kenny, played by Will Ropp. But other than that, I can't say that this does anything special. Way too much exposition, plot points come out of nowhere and are underdeveloped, and then there's some serious manipulation going on. Yeah, I cried a little, but it's hard not to cry when you throw in sick kids in a children's hospital. It feels so forced and doesn't feel like it needed to be in the movie. I might even argue that the final act wasn't necessary. For one thing, the close of the second act ends on a freeze frame, making you think it's over anyway. But then we're just thrown a downer of a third act that isn't resolved all that well. I might have some respect for the final scenes, but overall, I just didn't agree with it. By no means bad. If you're a sucker for these kinds of movies, then by all means, go check it out. It's a perfectly serviceable way to kill a couple of hours. But if you're anything like me and you were hoping for something that was more fresh, then I'd say you'd better save it for a rental. But honestly, you wouldn't be missing much if you decided to pass on it altogether. My honest rating for The Way Back, a 3 out of 5. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. Hope to see you soon.